So at this stage, I'd like to do a little bit of adjustment to the inclination of the head as well as the height of the shoulders. Now the shoulders will be simple because I can just take the move brush and I can drop the shoulders down and I can just slide the chest and the pectoralis muscles down like this. We'll just bring this into a little bit of an arc here. Turn my focal shift down on the move brush. And we'll just adjust sort of the sweep of the clavicle here. Go to top view, and I just want to bring those clavicles forward a little bit. Turn my draw size down, and just narrow those a little bit. There we go. Bring that back and out. Go back to our clay tubes brush. Then we can build up the volume here that we've lost and get that sense of the deltoid sort of wrapping around in this direction. I'm just going to do a little bit of a fill-in in this area here, and then go back to my move brush. I just really want to make sure that I get that sweep of the clavicle because it does have sort of 3/3 to it in terms of sections. So that is to say that there is 1/3, and then it sweeps back to the 2nd third, and then it comes out to the 3rd third. So it's kind of like a set of handlebars if you think about it. So let's just bring these up a little bit. There we go. Now the head, if I want to tilt the head up a little bit or change the orientation of the head, that's going to be a little trickier because I've got eyes and teeth in there. So how do we adjust those together? Well, we're going to use Z plugin. I'm going to tear this menu off by clicking the radial icon there. Now we use Subtool Master to mirror the eyes. Now we're going to use Transpose Master. Now what Transpose Master is going to do, when I press the T-Pose Mesh button, it will take all of my subtools and it will merge them together into one subtool that I can then temporarily pose, and then I'll transfer the pose data back over with the T-Pose to Sub-T button. So that will allow me to bake everything down into one temporary tool. So watch what happens when I click that. I click T-Pose Mesh, it takes all of these and then puts them together into a single tool. So now I'll just take my masking. Let's mask the head out. Get a good feather to the edge of that mask. Control click on the background to invert it, and then control click on the mask to feather it. And then I'll just take my transpose gizmo, hold down the Alt key and position it back here at the base of the skull. And now if I rotate it around the X-axis, I can change the orientation of that head a little bit. I just wanted to raise that inclination of that head just a little bit more. Now I'll clear my mask, and I could also do a little bit of sculpting here if I wanted to, but you want to be careful not to forget that you're in a transpose master tool, and then carry on doing sculpting and adding subdivision levels. So what we want to do as soon as we finished our posing, we press T-Pose to Sub-T, and it'll take all that pose information and copy each piece over to the subtools. So I've now transferred that pose information. So I'm feeling a little bit better about that. So just the posture of that's feeling a bit more interesting to me. So I'm going to take my move brush here, and I'm just going to bring a little bit more volume down under those cheekbones. Let's pull that out a little bit so it's not quite so hollow in there. And I think I'm going to bring these up and just adjust that flare on that jawline. Now I'm going to take my move brush, turn my focal shift down, and I'm just going to bring these neck muscles forward a little bit. Don't neglect to use the fact that you can look at your model from unusual angles here to really describe and see the form. That's really helpful. And again, it's something, if you've ever sculpted in physical clay, it's harder to do with physical clay because, like I said, depending on the size of your sculpture, you might have to actually get down on the floor to get some of these views. But here in ZBrush, we can really take advantage of the fact that we can just gesturally move around the figure and look at it from every possible angle. I'm working on the heads of the sternomastoid muscles here. It's the muscle, the big muscles of the neck that everyone's familiar with. It's called the sternocleidomastoid because its name tells you where it attaches. So there's the mastoid process here at the base of the skull under the ear. That's the mastoid. And then there's the sternum here, and the clavicle here. So there's 3 points of attachment for that muscle. So that's why it's called sternocleidomastoid. Most anatomical names are actually kind of easy, other than the fact that they're Latin, in that they basically just say where a muscle attaches and what it does. So I'm going to take my move brush, and in the silhouette here, we've got this little thumbnail view. If I click and drag that out, I can actually see my figure in thumbnail. And this can be really helpful to just see the character in silhouette, because sometimes the internal forms can be misleading. They get a little distracting. So right here, I just want to be thinking about the transition up into the muscles, the underside of the jaw here. So if I watch as I change my shapes here in the model, it updates in my silhouette. So it can be helpful depending on sort of how you are accustomed to thinking about shapes. ZBrush Pixelogic understands that silhouette, from a design perspective, is really the most important consideration right out of the gate. So they made sure that there is a way that you can see just your silhouette as you're working. I'm going to go to my damn standard brush and just create some little hanging bits of skin here. Waddles, they're sometimes called. Now, I don't want these to be symmetrical, so I'm going to turn my X symmetry off, and I'm just going to create some nice asymmetrical folds of skin coming down here into the neck. Now I'll take my clay tubes brush, and I'm going to change to alpha 1, so that gives me a nice sort of fall off on this brush, and I'll just use this to sort of build up some of these. Now I could also use the standard brush with alpha 1, and you'll see this actually is a little bit more aggressive in its build up. So this is one of those things where you should just follow along, sculpt your own things, and experiment with these brushes and get a feel for how they behave. Because like I say a few times over the course of these lectures, I can show you and tell you so many things when it comes to the ins and outs of ZBrush. But the one thing that you can never verbally express or communicate to someone is what the feeling of the brush is going to be when it's in your hand, because everyone's got a little bit of a difference in the amount of pressure they use, their style of creating shape. If you haven't sculpted before, you might not even know how you create form yet. So you're going to learn by doing, and you're going to get a feel for the best possible brush combinations for yourself. So I was looking at this side view here, and this is just really a straight angle right here, and I want to break this up. I really want to give a sense of profile to this. So I'm going to mask the nasal bone and the cheekbone because I'm quite happy with all of this. But I do think that I'd like to give a little bit more variation to the profile here just by bringing out the muzzle, as it were, kind of the maxilla and the mandible. I just want to bring the volumes out on that. And let's grab the corners of that mouth and pull those back. Now that's placed the teeth rather deep inside the head, so I'm going to alt-click on the tooth subtool, press the W key for the gizmo, unlock it, reset it so it's just sitting straight down the axis, then I'll lock it again, and then I can just click and drag. And then I could pull those teeth forward a little bit. You see, as I move them here, it updates in my view there. So I'm going to undo that move down and do it again, but just make it a little bit less pronounced. So we're just trying to imagine where these teeth are in relation to the skull underneath, because we've tilted the head back. Those upper teeth are going to be right here on this angle. So I just want to make sure that that's making sense. Now I'm going to alt-click on the head to come back to that, and we'll just clear that mask. And I'm going to use my move brush just to scoot the underside of the lip in here. And I'm going to take my damn standard brush, and maybe there's sort of like scarification running straight down this lip here. That's pretty creepy and neat, so we're just going to run this sort of split right down there. And I have X symmetry turned off right now, so I can create these sort of asymmetrical slashes in the mouth. Go back to my move brush, grab the corner of this mouth, bring that back and in a little bit. Now the lower lip tends to tuck under the upper lip, so I'm going to take my clay tubes brush with no alpha. I'm going to turn the alpha off, and I'm just going to reduce the thumbnail here because I'm not using it now. I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and I'm just going to knock back some planes here. Now this is something that's going to be pretty symmetrical, so I'm going to turn on my X symmetry again for this. Hold down the Alt key, and I just want to adjust the shape of this lip as it's tucking up under there. Now, notice I'm actually adding color because RGB is turned on. So I could undo that to get rid of that color. Or if I didn't want to undo a bunch of strokes, if I was doing that for a while and I didn't want to have to undo all the way, what I can do is just turn off RGB on my brush. But if I want to get rid of the color that's already there, we'll leave RGB turned on, make sure white is selected, and go to Color, Fill Object. And that'll just clear any color that we painted, and then I'll turn RGB off on the brush. So now I'm just going to use this clay tubes brush to sort of refine this lip and the way it sort of intersects with the rest of the mouth. If we turn on solo, that's going to hide the rest of our subtools. And I'm going to use the masking brush here just to mask out the inside of the mouth, because it's going to be easier now to sort of finesse the lips if the lips have a proper thickness to them and a return, like there's sort of the lips curl back inside as they normally would in the inside of the mouth. So let's go ahead and mask out where that's going to be, like this. Make sure everything is masked. Control click on the background. And now it's just a very simple matter of taking the move brush and just pulling these faces up and down to get the back of the lips there. You see, if I hold down the Alt key, I can push these faces up, and I can hold down the Alt key down here and push these faces down. And then just use the move brush to pull this back. Now, I'm going to go ahead and Dynamesh, because we've stretched this out a bit, and I'm just going to Control click and drag once to clear the mask, Control click and drag a second time to execute Dynamesh. Do a little bit of smoothing in here. And now we'll create our mask again. Now, we're not going to see inside the mouth of this creature, but I do want to give it some more depth in here. The teeth are going to be closed, and they're going to hide the mouth bag. Control click on the background to invert the mask. And I can be really aggressive with this if I just take the transpose gizmo. You see it's up here. By the way, if your transpose gizmo is somewhere where you ever can't find it, somewhere off screen perhaps, like maybe at some point I had my transpose gizmo up here, and so I'm zoomed in and trying to work and I can't see it, just Alt click on the model and it'll snap the transpose gizmo to wherever you are. I'll turn off my X symmetry and go to Unmasked Mesh Center, unlock the gizmo, reset it, lock it, and then I can just use the Z transform to move those faces back. So we're just going to move that sort of mouth back inside the head like this. Control click and drag twice, and that will execute Dynamesh. So it's going to be a bit easier for us to work the lips now. Let's do something similar to the eyes. I'm just going to mask out the interior of the eyes here. Now make sure we have our X symmetry turned on for this, because obviously we have two eyes. So I'm going to mask that, and I'm going to turn off solo so I can see I've overpainted that mask. I don't want that mask to go to sort of go outside of where the eyes actually are. So I'm going to unmask that. Now, if I want to grow this mask, I can go to my masking menu under the tool menu here. Let's close some of these submenus so it's a bit easier to see what's happening. So if I go to Tool, Masking, I have the option to grow mask. So if I click this, I can grow that mask, and then I can sharpen the mask, grow the mask further, and sharpen the mask like that. Maybe I want to shrink the mask, and then sharpen it. So you can sort of adjust where your masking is using these brushes. I'll turn on solo, Control click on the background to invert the mask. And once again, I'll just take the move brush, hold down Alt, and just push those faces back. And then pull them out a bit so we get a bit of sort of like a thickness to that eyelid. Now that creates this sort of jagged edge here, but watch, we clear the mask, execute Dynamesh, and it will just smooth that out for us. So we can then take our smooth brush, clean that up, clean this up, take our inflate brush, do a little bit of inflating here, just to get some thickness to that sort of eyelid tissue. Let's turn solo off so we can see the eyes again. We can inflate these. And we'll go to our damn standard brush again and just come in here and etch in a few more. Creases around there. I really want this to feel like the eye is kind of sitting in this sort of tissuey socket of flesh. Such creepy stuff. That's what I think about. So there we go. Get some nice sort of wrinkle patterning in there. And my eyes are asymmetrical, so I'm going to turn X symmetry off. Hold down the Alt key when you're using the the dam standard brush. Remember also to turn off any sort of color if you happen to have turned on color while we were working on the eyes. Hold down the Alt key and it will pinch. That's the dam standard brush. So this is really great for getting the edges of eyelids like this. You see that things are getting a little bit noisy in terms of like the stretched polygons here. See those? But watch, just control, click, and drag. It will Dynamesh and clean that up. Now, as you're working, if you feel like you don't have enough geometry to represent the shapes you're trying to make, like if you're running out of detail, you can always go to the geometry menu, go to Dynamesh, and you can increase this resolution slider, but I would increase it gently, bit by bit. Don't turn it up too high because it's possible to have too many polygons to work on. It'll make it really hard for you to sculpt. So just be aware that you're not locked into just this default setting. It is absolutely possible to adjust your Dynamesh resolution, and we often do. So I'm just going to tweak these eyelids. Having some asymmetry, just a little asymmetry in the eyelids, can make a big difference in terms of character. And I'm going to bring these out a little bit, up. And I always like to pull this off the surface of the eyelid. That would be the medial canthus. Sometimes it's called the tear duct. It's the little pink bit of skin in there is called the carnacle. And it's just a little mucous membrane for the eye. And it's just a real nice detail. And it's always nice to remember that that sits off the eye. So I'm going to turn my X symmetry on. And I'm going to mask out this area. It's going to be a neat little detail if we can get that little membrane in there. So make sure that that's accurate on both sides. There we go. And now I'm going to control click on the background to invert my mask. And I'll just take the smooth brush and smooth that out. Take the inflate brush, that's B for brush, I for inflate, and then the N hotkey. And then we'll inflate this. I'm just building this out, and then I'll take the move brush and sort of pull it up against the eye, and that'll give us that little membrane that sits right there in the corner of the eye socket. There you go. You see it on both sides. I'm going to turn my X symmetry off because, like I said, I did make the eyes a bit asymmetrical on purpose. So we're going to have to give it a little bit of personal attention here. That's another thing that I stress a lot in my introduction to ZBrush classes is get accustomed to introducing asymmetry sooner than later. You don't want to go crazy and make your entire character asymmetrical at the beginning. That's going to make it really hard for you to sculpt. But as you get further into developing the character, once you've got some asymmetry in there, it's going to really help make things feel more natural and interesting, because 3D just tends towards symmetry. It's the natural state of 3D. And sculpture and life doesn't really tend towards symmetry unless you're talking about plants or shells or something like that. But like, you know, organic kind of creatures, very rarely are they perfectly symmetrical. So it's nice to introduce that sort of detail. All right, so I've put those sort of nictating membranes in there. Control, click, drag on the background to execute Dynamesh, and there you go. It just cleans all that up. And I can just take the inflate brush in here and add a little bit more detail if I want to. Let's do the same over on this side. Areas like this, by the way, you might notice where down in the crevices things get a little bit, maybe a little bit of noise in there. That's just down to the Dynamesh resolution. It's not really a problem. I wouldn't worry about it right now with your first sculpture, but that's something that you can correct by turning up your resolution. So moving around our figure, I'm going to go back to my my dam standard brush and hold down the Alt key and create some kind of raised spiny, or not spines, I guess raised blade kind of striations here. I definitely want these to be asymmetrical. This is something that will really stand out if it's symmetrical. I'm going to turn my brush size down and just sort of catch a little bit of shadow here, and then hold down the Alt key and get a nice sharp edge here. I'm going to touch with the trim dynamic, or the dam standard brush, I should say, and hold down the shift key and then drag, and this gives me this straight line like that. Let go, and that'll give me a sort of a straight etched line. So let me undo that, and I'll do it again and show you somewhere where it's a little bit easier to see. If we go to this point here, if I touch down with the damn standard brush, hold the shift key, and then drag my brush and let go. It creates a straight striation like that, which is pretty handy. Let's get some variations in the nasal bone there. So I've got a little nick right there that I don't like. I'm going to take my clay tubes brush and I'm going to fill that out. Hold down the Alt key, sort of knock back a plane here, and then fill that transition in. Now, from the back, I'm going to take my damn standard brush and let's put some sort of scalloping on the undersides of these so they're not quite so sort of soft and pliable looking. Hold down the Alt key, and we'll pinch some of these into ridges. Just picking out shadow here and then holding down the Alt key to get a nice striation. We'll turn on my X symmetry here. This can be a little bit symmetrical. We can have some symmetrical elements up here. Let's go ahead and create some interesting details on the back side of this. Maybe we've got some sort of scalloping fin-like shapes that come back here. That's pretty neat. I'll hold down the Alt key and just do something like this on the back of the skull. That's pretty interesting. And then I'll just smooth that back just a little bit. And I'm going to come back down here with my move brush and just adjust that shape, do a little bit of smoothing. Take my clay tubes brush, turn my Z intensity down a little bit, and I just want to do a little bit of filling in. Not too much, that's too much. I'm going to turn it down even more. I just want to fill in some of those recesses. I don't want to get rid of those striations entirely, those muscle forms, but I don't want them to be quite so deep. Take my move brush and just sort of shift this stuff around. Take my clay tubes brush again and just transition that deltoid down into the upper arm. Like so. Take my damn standard brush and then just sort of stroke in the direction that the striations of this muscle would flow. And they're a little overstated, but that's fine. That's what I want right now. And then I'm going to take my smooth brush, sort of smooth these back a little bit. Then I'll take my clay tubes brush and just run that across there, filling in those recesses a little bit. The clay tubes brush is really nice because the default behavior of that brush is, or any brush that's based on the clay brushes, is that it fills in recessed areas first. So it's really very useful in that regard. I'm going to take my move brush and turn my focal shift down, and I'm just going to change that flow from the tricep into the upper arm, and we want to actually bring this down a little bit. I'm going to mask this whole area here. I just want to bring this shape down. Control, click, and drag twice to execute Dynamesh, and we'll just do a little bit of smoothing in this area. Take some clay tubes there, and then I'll take my damn standard brush and just add a few kind of wrinkles of skin here. And then take my standard brush with alpha 1, and we can then build up in between those recesses. A lot of times I say if I carve a wrinkle, I'll always try and add a raised wrinkle next to it because it helps with the contrast and it helps sort of accentuate those forms there. So then we'll smooth that back so it's a little bit more subtle. And there we go. So this is all just out of a sphere. You can just keep pushing and pulling and adding body parts and primitive volumes to build out an entire character. There's so many different ways to actually make a character in ZBrush. And one of them is to use Dynamesh in this regard, to just build it from balls of clay and pieces of other models. So, but this is the quick start. So this is just getting you going sculpting. We'll talk about all the other methodologies as we go further. try and make sure that Intro to ZBrush 2021 is truly an intro. Just about everything I could think to put in here that is going to really be important for you, I've tried to put in here. So we're going to revisit this head when we talk about Z-spheres in a few chapters. We'll use Z-spheres to build a body for this guy. Then we can merge those together and carry on having a body on what was previously just a bust. I'm taking my damn standard brush and just adding a few little touches there. My standard brush will build these up. And then my trim dynamic brush, and I'm going to knock back planes there so those don't sort of sit quite so high, and then smooth that back. I'm going to take my clay tubes brush, and I'm going to use Alpha 1 for my clay tubes brush. And this is neat. If I take this and I run this brush up along the neck here, this creates these sort of raised bits that go in between the high points. So watch, I'm going to turn my Z intensity up pretty high so you can see it. I can create things like this where I can really build up sort of tendons that flow in between the high points of the sculpture. Another thing that we can do when we get into detailing is if we use that clay tubes brush, I'm going to undo this. Use the clay tubes brush, but change our alpha to alpha 60. This alpha here with the straight up and down squiggly lines. Because the clay brushes add in the recesses first, if I take this brush, turn it up, turn my Z intensity down, and then start my stroke in a recessed area, it creates these really realistic tissuey bits of stretched skin like that sort of go from one high point to another and traverse that sort of recessed plane there. And that's really nice for creating this sort of tissuey, elderly kind of skin. And I love this texture, and this is one of my favorite brushes for detailing sort of cadaverous or zombie-like creatures. See, it's this sort of raised wrinkling that we're getting right there from high point to high point that makes all the difference. I'm just going to knock back a little bit of smooth on that and there. Now I'm going to mask this whole area here. It's where the hyoid bone would be and the trachea. I'm going to mask all this out. Control-click, and I'm actually going to turn my X symmetry on with my move brush, and I just want to slide some of these shapes down a little bit. I feel like those just got too deep up underneath there. I want to give a little bit of sag to this. So pull this down, pull these shapes down so they're not so deep underneath that jaw, and then we can start to get kind of this cool sagging skin. Clear my mask, and there's this little dent there. I want to get rid of that. I'm just going to pull that down and then execute Dynamesh. Now is a good time for us to save our work. We want to make sure that we save often. So I'm going to just do a couple little tweaks on here. I'm going to mask the front of the torso. Take the move brush and make sure that my X symmetry is turned on, and I'm going to bring these shoulder blades down. Bring these arms down just a little bit here. Take the inflate brush, B-I-N, and just do a little bit of inflating here so we can kind of compress that bit of skin together and clear our masking. And we're going to go ahead and take the standard brush with that wrinkle alpha. That was the straight up and down alpha, alpha 60 here. And I'm going to hold down the Alt key. Make sure my Z intensity is down low enough. I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and I'm just going to create some wrinkles. There's a little wrinkle pattern coming out from the armpit here and running across the deltoid, just to give us a little bit of skin texture in these areas. Use the smooth brush just to knock that back so it's not quite so noisy. And as I get close to the center here, I want to make sure that I turn my X symmetry off. I don't want that symmetry turned on at the center line because it'll be really apparent that that's symmetrical. So we're just going to radiate these wrinkles out and then up through the neck here. Let's zoom in a little bit and just run these wrinkles through here. And then once again, take our smooth brush, and that's a little too strong, so I'm going to turn my Z intensity down on the smooth brush and just gently smooth back some of the noise in those wrinkles, just so it's a little touch to the surface. Turn our Z intensity down one more time on that brush, and I'm just going to make these circular patterns, which gives us this nice sort of cross-hatching texture. Just adds a little bit of tooth to the skin, breaks things up a little bit, then we'll smooth that back. Come up here under the neck, turn our draw size down, hold down the Alt key, and we'll just do some like crisscrossing wrinkles through the wattles of the neck here. And I'm going to turn my draw size up, and I'll just let these come up the sides of the face here. Just want to give a little bit of skin texture, a little bit of interest through here. And then once again, give a bit of a smoothing to that. And I can turn my X symmetry back on at the sides of the head here where we can't see these two sides of the head at the same time, just so we can put a little bit of noise here, a little bit of breakup in this skin. And I'll just do a few strokes running down this way, letting that skin kind of wrinkle in a natural pattern. Turn my X symmetry off, and then just break the symmetry here at the center so it's not perfectly symmetrical. And then let these wrinkles radiate out from this point where there's going to be a lot of motion in the arm. And then once again, turn on our X symmetry, and we'll just do a little bit of smoothing just to knock back, again, the tooth on that so it's not quite so noisy. Put some wrinkles down here at the base of the skull, just so we've got a little bit more detail. And I'm going to take my damn standard brush and just sort of put a little bit more thought into this ear. It's kind of a little misshapen ear, which is fitting for the creature. So I'll pull that earlobe out a little bit, take my clay tubes brush, build out that earlobe, take my damn standard brush, get that leg of the helix that dips down inside there, and just start to break up these shapes a little bit. I'm going to mask out the outermost section of the ear here. Take my move brush and just tug all these faces in. Let's mask the inside of the ear as well so we don't accidentally impact that. And we'll just pull these faces back behind the ear and give it a little bit of draft again, a little bit of depth. We don't want it to be too thin, so I'm going to pull these in, invert that mask, and then take the inflate brush and just do a little bit of inflating along the earlobe there. Take the move brush, and we'll just pull that out from the surface. Maybe turn our brush size down and just make that earlobe a little bit more narrow. And then we can carve in some negative space there and then execute our Dynamesh. Do a bit of smoothing here with the smooth brush. Take the clay tubes brush and we'll just fill out any kind of problem areas there. Take our standard brush and make that little sort of Y shape that we get in the earlobe. There we go. Just so there's a little bit of something happening to that ear that feels a bit natural. Go to our standard brush and switch back to that wrinkle alpha, and we can just put a little bit of skin texture on the ear here by making a circular pattern. Turn our draw size up and do a little bit of a circular pattern up here in the temple region, just so we've got some skin texture, some tooth on here that's breaking up that area. And once again, I'll knock back areas that feel too noisy by using the smooth brush. We'll do the same thing here through the brow. Turn off your X symmetry though. Anytime we get near the center line, we just want to turn that X symmetry off. And I'm just doing a circular pattern to get a broken up kind of cross-hatched pattern and then sort of extending these wrinkles down along these striations here. And I'm going to turn my draw size up, and let's bring some wrinkles down the muzzle into the mouth area. So these wrinkles sort of radiate down the face like this. Now I'll turn my draw size down and then add some wrinkles around the nasal cavity here. And we'll do the same thing down here under the eyes. And we'll zoom in. We'll take our dim standard brush and we just want to carve in some eye bags here. Just put a little bit more detail into this area. We'll do the same thing on the other side here. Zoom out. And then let's give a little bit of attention to that lower jaw, lower mouth. So we're going to take our clay tubes brush. And let's build that lower lip up. You remember how we were talking about the lower lip tucking under the upper lip. So let's give that a little bit of form there. We'll take the clay tubes brush, turn off our alpha, and turn our focal shift down. And build up these little corners of the mouth here. These are called the nodes of the lips. These little sort of donut shapes here at the corners of the mouth. I just want to get these sculpted in. Get that lip built up here. Smooth that back, and we'll turn on our X symmetry and just build up a little bit of volume here for the muscles of the mouth, like so. Take our standard brush and hold down the Alt key, and then let's just let some of these wrinkles traverse out from the mouth here. Let's turn our draw size up and let these wrinkles radiate out from the mouth. And I'll turn my draw size down and just do a little bit of cross-hatching here. So there we go. Now I'm going to adjust my lighting. I'll go to the light menu here and I'll bring this light up to about 11 o'clock. That'll give me a nice bit of raking light. Go back to my light menu and I'll turn on the secondary light and I'll bring this up to 3 o'clock and I'll turn the intensity up to a little bit above 1 and then click on that orange dot and that puts that light behind the model, so it gives us a nice rim light here. So let's just do a quick render and see how this looks. I'm going to go to the render menu, go to BPR shadow and turn angle up to maybe about 33 and click BPR. And there we go. So that's our first ZBrush sculpture. That's our quick start. We've learned how to navigate in ZBrush. We've learned how to use Dynamesh and the brushes to build form and dynamically remesh our model as we sculpt. So we're essentially sketching in digital clay. We've talked about moving subtools, adding subtools. We've even touched on materials and material customization and filling our objects with color. So this is the foundation upon which the rest of these video lessons are based. Just what you've learned in this chapter is really the foundation of ZBrush. You can take this information, go forward, and spend a lot of time learning sculpting and learning brushes and navigation and exploring the program before you move on into more intensive study of things like subdivision models and subdivision levels, where we take a Dynamesh model like this and then convert it to a model that has subdivision levels so we can pose it and add UV coordinates, extract maps, and then take that out into a pipeline with like ZBrush to Maya or ZBrush to 3D Studio Max. So I hope you've enjoyed this quick look and this quick start. We're going to move on and go into much more depth in the individual tools and techniques in the program from here on. And thanks for watching, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video.